The large spider made me cringe.
Say cringe.
Cringe.
Look, let's cringe. Go like this. Ooh, if I see a spider, what am I going to do?
Dr. Elsa Cárdenas-Hagan has devoted her entire career to helping English learners. As the founder of a tutoring center in Brownsville, Texas, she works one-on-one with children like Emilio, helping to develop their language and literacy skills.
That was a good sentence.
As a researcher, she's developed reading assessments and intervention programs, and she's written frequently for top academic journals. And for many years, Dr. Cárdenas-Hagan has crisscrossed the country to work closely with classroom teachers, serving as a trainer, mentor, and coach. In the following presentation, she explains what every teacher should know about working with English learners. She begins with the milestones for oral language.
Say it again.
Every baby in the whole world, when they're born, what do? At 3 months, they coo. They make little noises. At 6 months, they babble. Ba, 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 ma, ma, ma. By the way, they weren't telling you mama or dada. They were just playing with the language. By 1 year of age, they're using words. They're starting to use words, and they can get up to 50 words. Then they're 2, and they put 2 words together. More juice. In my home language, más jugo, right? At 3, now you see them bringing in pronouns. I want juice. Yo quiero jugo. And that's fantastic. But also what we see happening at the same time is the development of speech sounds. And we've got to be attuned to that. What sounds do they have in their language? Can they process the vowel sounds and produce them? What are some of the first sounds that appear in a baby's language? Sounds made with the lips. And those sounds can exist in so many languages across the world. But now they're at the age of 3, let's say, and I just told you that they put 3 words together. They're now getting some sentence structure in there. But we also see that they're developing sounds, like sounds made in the back of your throat, like k and g. By the time they're 4, they're starting to do more sounds, s and z. By the time they're 5, they have so many sounds in their language. At the age of 4, they're putting 4 words together. At the age of 5, they're putting 5 words together. Now they're in 1st grade. By 1st grade, the students should have the speech sounds of the language, of their home language, right? But we want to make sure they at least have their home language sounds that are expected so that we can determine, are there any issues about the sounds? Can they process the sounds? Can they produce the sounds? Because how I process and produce the sounds will be how I read and write them. By the end of 1st grade, they should have all the sounds. So I want every 1st grade teacher out there to know, and every administrator to know, and every parent to know. Listen carefully to the sounds that they're able to produce, and then think about, are they on level? Because those are risk factors for future reading abilities. And we want to make sure that they develop these speech sounds and these language skills at that level. So, when they are 7 and 8, you speak in 7 or 8 word sentences, and that's fantastic. But what about English learners? What about those students who are just now developing their language? We're going to understand that it's their second language and what opportunities have they had. So when you first come to this new language, guess what you're doing? We call it the silent period. It's not really so silent, but what it means is they're taking in this new language and they're trying to figure out how it works. It's not that they're not learning. They're not yet willing to risk take and speak to you. And then they move into those early production stages where they might speak in 1 or 2 word phrases or answer simple yes and no questions. And then they move into, now I can do some simple sentences. And they get really excited to share because now they are feeling much more confident because you have set up that environment. And then we say they move into the intermediate stage where now they're really conversing, they're engaging, they're going beyond the simple sentences, they're speaking in more complex sentences. And finally, they get to the advanced stage where we say it takes about 5 to 7 years to get to that advanced language stage where they can communicate beautifully in this new language, and it's equal to their monolingual English-speaking peers. So we've got to be patient, but we've got to be monitoring that second language acquisition. So every educator out there must know, what are those language milestones? What are they in your first language? And how does it develop in that second language? Because we're going to apply that to our literacy instruction. It's very easy, if you're worried about some students, that you can actually take a language sample and ask questions, engage them, ask them about what they did over the weekend, ask them about, what's their favorite hobby or their favorite sport, and get them to speak to you and to be a formal language sample. And you can look to see, what are the patterns that they have today, and can I explicitly work on some patterns that they need for tomorrow? And when I walk into classrooms, I see a lot of opportunities for students, sentence builders, sentence starters, but we need to get to the root of, why aren't they speaking in complete sentences? What skills do they have? What does that syntax look like in their language? What does it look like in this second language? And how can I build upon that? Do they have the noun with the verb? Can they put a noun and a verb and an object together, right? Can they expand it with some conjunctions? Or do they have pronouns? Do they have adjectives and adverbs? That's taking it from a very systematic and explicit approach. And that's what we do when we work with children that struggle with building those language skills. We do it in a very systematic way. And I gave you what those milestones were. 1-year-old, 1 words, 2-year-old, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, 6, 6, 7, 7. If they're speaking in 7 or 8 word sentences, I'm happy. You're good. But I really want to get at the connections that you can make. And what I like to say is that you do not have to know the student's home language in order to make those cross-linguistic connections. What you do need to know is, what are those cross-linguistic connections? And I like to look up on the internet, mylanguages.org, and I find out, what is the home language of the student? And are there any connections to be made regarding the sounds of their home language and English? Spanish is the most prominent language of our English learners today. So there are so many sounds. I actually counted 19 sounds that are exactly the same between Spanish and English. In Spanish, for example, we say, they have 22 sounds in their language. Some people will say 24. In English, we say there's 44 sounds in the English language. Some folks will say 46. Either way that you look at it, English has double the number of sounds than the language of Spanish. English has more sounds than many, many languages. But what about those connections? Some vowel sounds that are similar between English and Spanish will be a sound like eh, right? Or a sound like oh. Those are very related. A sound like a is actually, we have that in Spanish. We just represent it in a different way than it is represented in the English language. The same thing with I. And a lot of folks don't even know that. Even native Spanish speakers don't know about those connections when we think about literacy. And so these sounds exist. So sounds like k and g, right? Sounds like oh and and n. Those all exist across the languages. Same thing in languages such as Arabic. Arabic has some sounds like b and sounds like o. Those exist across the languages. Knowing those connections is so important, and knowing how we can capitalize upon that, highlight it with our students. Now, what's going to be problematic in the English language? Oh my goodness. What's going to be problematic are those short vowel sounds. Ah, eh, ah, right? That schwa sound's going to be problematic. Also, our sounds like those digraphs, those two sounds like sh and zh and but we can make connections with, okay, are there any approximations that we can make from their home language to English? Is there anything that's almost the same? And I like to talk a lot about, for example, in the English language, and I even think about my dad, having trouble with sounds like ch and sh. And so those were challenging sounds. But I don't understand why ch is a hard sound of English. In Spanish, we have the sound ch, right? But when you have the sound in English, such as j. That's a very challenging sound. That we use the letter J for that sound. We can use G before E or I or Y, right? Or DGE at the end of a word. But here's a little hint for you. I want you to get your hand, and I want you to put your hand on your throat right now, right here. And I want you to say the sound for the CH sound. Ch, ch, ch. Do you feel any vibration? Ch, ch, ch. Your vocal cords are not vibrating. But the challenging sound for our English learners is the sound j. So what I want you to do is I want you to say ch, ch, ch 3 times. Now I want you to add voicing. Make your vocal cords vibrate. Say ch, but add voicing. J, j, j. Turn off your voice box. Ch, ch, ch. Turn it on. J, j, j. That's a connection we can make. And when we do that, the students are like, I got it. I got this new sound that was so challenging. Sometimes when I work with teachers that they themselves speak English as their second language, they said, oh, that sound always bothered me, but you just gave me a connection that will help me so very much, right? Another connection that we can make is that oftentimes in the Spanish language, we pronounce all the vowel sounds, right? And so it's very difficult for us to not pronounce some of the vowel sounds. So that's challenging. The R in English isn't trilled. We like to go and we like to trill it. So we have to learn how to soften that R, right? How to soften that sound. But there's also connections because we have what we call the soft R in Spanish. And it's when it's between 2 vowels. So here's my face. And the word for face, for example, in the Spanish language is cara. Cara. The word for hour, like what hour is it? Hora, hora, cara, cara. And what you're going to notice there is I didn't trill that R. We call it the soft R, cara, hora. And it actually represents the medial sound. We call it a flap sound. The medial T, like in the word Katie, my niece is Katie, right? Or in a word like letter or ladder. That medial T and D, when a student writes L-E-R-E-R for letter, I say, good for you. Why? Because you got the sound. You're just using your letter from your home language. The new letter is going to either be T or D in that medial position between 2 vowels. And a lot of instructors don't understand, why do they put an R in place of a T or a D? That makes no sense. You know, I thought they trilled every R. No. There's a soft R that is the English medial T and D sound. So that's so important. Another sound that's so challenging is the sound for TH, like in the words father and mother. And you know what's going to happen? Everyone look at your finger. I want you to say D-E-D-O, dedo. Say it like me. Look at my mouth. Dedo. D-E-D-O. But that second D, I pronounced it differently from that first D, right? The second D was pronounced like English. So when the children write father, F-A-D-E-R, you're going to say, good for you. You got the sound. In Spanish, you use D, right? In English, we use TH. And there's 2 sounds for TH. This one is going to be with the voice box on. There's another one with the voice box off, like in thimble or thistle. So those are connections to be made, and it helps us to understand those connections. Let's look at their reading samples and their writing samples, and from there, we can figure out why are those error patterns. Errors inform instruction. Listen carefully. Errors inform instruction. So I look at that error, and that error tells me what I need to do. Why? Why do they have that error? What can I do about that error? And so that's going to help me very much to inform instruction. It's an opportunity for learning. It's an opportunity for you and your teaching. As we think about that foundational skill that we call phonological awareness, it's that ability to process the sounds, manipulate the sounds, and play with the language through sounds. And it's a foundational skill that we find can benefit reading in English and many other languages across the world. And so as we look at phonological awareness, one of the things we can capitalize upon and think about is first using the sounds that already exist from the home language to English. So I might want to say a word like said in English, right? And I know that I have those sounds in the Spanish language. So I might ask them, tell me the sounds of said, said. Let's use what you know transfers across languages, and this can help them to process the sounds and produce the sounds. So what's going to look different about this instruction where you're playing with the sounds of this new language is that you're going to add vocabulary to it and making sure that they understand what words they just produced and what words and sounds they just manipulated to form new words, right? Can I form some words with those sounds and teach them those words, but have them process the sounds, produce the sounds, manipulate the sounds? And then that's going to be important because that tells us how well they're going to be able to decode and read. It's a foundational skill. And when we think about this, I'm going to start first with what they know, and then I'm going to start with some challenging sounds. So my phonological awareness instruction is going to look a little bit different because I'm going to specifically target a new sound. So I mentioned earlier that the sound j is a challenging sound, right? So I'm going to say some words. Say the word ham. I want you to change the sound h to j. What's my new word? Jam. Oh, it's that. I have a picture of jam to show you. It's what I put on my toasted bread and I can eat it and it's sweet. Jam. Say it again. Jam. Very good. Say the word hog. Now change the h to j. What's my new word? Jog. Kind of running in place. Let's all try and get up and run slowly. That's a jog.
Now let's see what this looks like. Here's Dr. Cárdenas-Hagan working one-on-one with 9-year-old Emilio.
So I want you to say this word after me. Say beanie.
Beanie.
Very good. Now I want you to change the first sound b. Just listen. Can you change it to j?
Genie.
Genie. Like I dream of genie. Do you know what a genie is? Tell me. Can you tell me in your words?
It's like a ghost.
Like a ghost, okay? Like it's like a magical, right? A magical character that comes out and it can grant you all your wishes, right? Did you ever watch the movie Aladdin?
No.
No, you never saw that? Oh, right. So that Aladdin had a genie. I'll have to show you something about Aladdin, right? Let's say the next word. Say Kim.
Kim.
Can you change the sound k to j?
Jim.
Gym. So I can work out at your school gym. Can you tell me a sentence with gym for your school?
Can I go to the gym?
Can I go to the gym? That was an excellent sentence. My goodness. Say the word Lent.
Lent.
Can you change the to j?
Gent.
Gent. Like, oh, he's such a gent. That kind of can be short for gentleman, right?
Yeah.
Can you say the word bell?
Bell.
Can you change the b to j?
Gel.
What did you put in your hair this morning?
Gel.
Gel. En español es gel, ¿verdad? ¿Tienes gel?
Sí.
Sí. Very good. Can you tell me a sentence in English with the word gel?
I put on my gel.
I put my gel on
My head.
on my head,
Hair.
on my
Hair.
Let's put it all together. I put the
The
gel
gel
on my.
on my hair.
Now you do it all by yourself.
I put my gel on my hair.
That was an excellent sentence. And you also got our new sound, j.
So what did I do? I expanded my phonological awareness by targeting a new sound. I had them do manipulation. I expanded it with vocabulary. I gave them some visuals. I gave them some verbal support. And maybe we could even create a sentence with it to work on that oral language as we're working on phonological awareness. Can you see how we integrated language with phonological awareness? That is an example of what you can do in your classroom with this foundational skill called phonological awareness. You can build language while you're doing that skill, and you can be very targeted in your instruction. So we've talked about phonological awareness, that ability to process the sounds, manipulate the sounds, play with the sounds, which includes blending and manipulation and segmenting from a word into the sound. But now I want to talk to you about how we're going to link that to print. Very valuable, and we want to make those connections. So what I'd like to model for you is, we know a challenging sound in the English language for English learners is the sound J. So I'm going to model for you how we might apply that and bring that sound to print now. That's called graphophonemic knowledge, taking that print, the grapheme, right, and linking it to the sound, the phoneme. So say these words after me. Jet, jam, jog. What sound did you hear at the very beginning of each of those words? The sound was J. For some students, you may have trouble saying this new sound J, especially students who may speak Spanish in their home language. So what I want you to do is touch your vocal cords and say ch, ch, ch. They didn't vibrate. Now let's turn on our vocal cords. J, j, j. Now they vibrate. Since you have that sound for the ch in your home language, it also exists in English, but it is a pair with that new English sound j. It's a connection to be made. Now I want you to show you the letter. Look at the letter. Do you see? It's the letter J. The sound is J. I'm going to give you a key word to unlock the sound. The key word is jaguar. Can you say it? Jaguar. Do you have that word in your language? You do? Jaguar. In your home language, you say for that letter J. In English, look at the letter J again. The sound is J. And I might use this picture of a jaguar to help you link and remember that new sound. Now, we want to help the student not only have that phonological awareness, we're linking the letter and sound together. Now we want to link it to print, and we want to have our students then move into that ability to read words with their new targeted sound. That's integrating phonological awareness with graphophonemic knowledge, getting on that journey to decoding and reading words and sentences. I'd like to speak to you about phonics knowledge for English learners. We know that English has 6 types of syllables. In languages such as Spanish, we don't have to worry about it. Transparent languages. What do I mean by transparent language? It's a language such as Spanish. Finnish is probably the most transparent language, but it's a language where every single sound is represented by one letter, right? And the sounds don't change. So, for example, in the Spanish language, there's 5 vowel sounds. A, E, I, O, U. They never change. In English, we call that an opaque language. We have vowel sounds, but they have more than one sound. We can start with just short and long vowel sounds, right? The English language, therefore, has 6 syllable types, which helps us to know when to pronounce the short vowel sound versus the long vowel sound. And so one of the most common syllable types is when you have a vowel and then it's followed by at least one consonant. And that will make the vowel short, right? So I might say a word like 10 in the English language, T-E-N. That has the vowel sound, and the consonant after it, N. I have the same pattern in Spanish, den. It means something totally different. It means like here, have it. In English, it's a number. So that closed syllable is a very common syllable type. Another syllable type is when the syllable ends in a vowel. Vowels open the mouth. A, E, I, O, U. We call that an open syllable. And that makes the vowel sound long, right? So I have in English the word no, N-O. I said O at the end. It's the long vowel sound. In Spanish, I would say no. But the vowel never changes, so I never learned about open syllables. So by you teaching me a closed syllable, that it ends in at least one consonant after that vowel, the vowel's short, and you teaching me that when it ends in a vowel, I'm going to say the long sound. I'm not going to say ah, I'm going to say oh for no. And then we can practice the differences between the closed syllable and the open syllable. That's a wonderful activity for English learners. We also have in English a vowel followed by a consonant and that silent E, like in the word dame, right? I said the long A sound, and it was followed by the M, and the E was silent. In Spanish, I have D-A-M-E. We say dame, means give it to me. But in English, it's dame. And what's really going to be problematic is you're going to ask me to not pronounce that final sound. You know, we have no silent vowels here. It's very difficult for me to take off that vowel. But you taught me a vowel, a consonant, and an E. And I do see most first grade teachers do this syllable type. So that's wonderful. But we want to make the connection to the home language if possible. And then we have two vowels together. Those are called the vowel pair syllables. The vowel pair syllables have two vowels in that same syllable. And you have to be careful. We're going to have to teach each one. You know that rule? When two vowels go walking, the first one does the talking. It's only true less than 50% of the time. I might have a word like pie in English, P-I-E, pie. You know, I have that same kind of word, P-I-E in Spanish, pie, right? And it's also this kind of vowel pair as well, putting it together in the same syllable, but it means foot. So you say pie, I say pie, right? So I need to learn, and you're going to have to teach me every single one of those vowel pairs. And then I have a vowel followed by that R. And, you know, in Spanish, we'll say R for our R. And we say every single sound. But a word like in English, M-A-R, right? Mar. In Spanish, mar. For me, it means ocean, right? But I'm going to have to learn not to trill that R. And I'm going to have to learn that that's only one syllable, right? And only that AR making one new sound. So you're going to have to teach me. And you're going to have to teach me A-R, E-R, I-R, O-R, U-R. You know, it's very, very difficult. When you have O-R, like in a word like doctor, doctor, notice I said or in Spanish. It never changes. But in English, the O-R changes. If I say a word like fort or corn, I heard or in that accented syllable. But when I say a word like tutor, doctor, oh, it's unaccented. Now I know to say but no one ever taught me to do that. Then that's why in English I say doctor, tutor. You have to teach me about accent, and you have to teach me when OR is not accented, it's going to say Same thing with AR. Star, car, far. That's an accented syllable. Those are one syllable words that are accented. Or I can say carport. But when you say something like dollar or collar, now I have to learn. It's in the unaccented syllable, and I'm going to say And then in English, you have that W. Oh, it messes us up. When I have that W in front of OR, like in world or worthy, that OR now is going to say Or I have the AR after the W, warm, worn, right? The sound changes, so we have to learn about that tricky W. So those are connections that we can make. But also, in languages such as English and Spanish, we have syllables at the end. We call them in English the final stable syllables. So words like that end in bull or cull or shun and jean. So a word like cable, right? That has that final ending, bull. We call that a final stable syllable. I have the same thing in Spanish, cable. But I pronounce that last E. Remember, it's not silent. in English it will be. We'll just say bull at the end, K-bull, right? And in that case, it means kind of the same thing across the two languages. So by teaching me very explicitly and systematically the structure of the English language and teaching me those syllable types, you're going to help me to understand when I read how to pronounce those vowels and how to read. And that really is going to help me to be a better decoder and get better at that automaticity of reading that will lead us, we hope, to better fluency and comprehension. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to read words. And we want to have some targeted reading practices for our students. And what that means is I would, have given an example of that letter J, right? That says J. Well, now we're going to have words. I taught you about closed syllables, so every one of these words is going to have a closed syllable. So what I want you to do is I want you to prepare the first row of reading. Look at the words on the first row, everybody. Prepare, ready, read. And so they might read like jam and jet and jig. Now read with fluency. And then we would hear them read those words very fluently. But now I'm going to bring in language skills as we're practicing decoding. I want you to look at the very first row. And I want you to read the word that rhymes with the word pig. Can you read the word? That was right. Jig. Wonderful reading. And remember, the jig, when we go fishing, we can jig the line, or I had the jig to help me with my fishing. Let's look at the next row. I'd like for you to prepare, get ready, and read the words. All of the words have your targeted sound, j, in a closed syllable. Ready, read. And then they would read, and they'll see there that there's words like Jim and job and Jack and Jan. Now I'd like for you not only to read these words, but read them with more fluency. See, I heard some choppiness there. And so then they can have an extra read if you didn't hear that they were reading it with ease, right? Or we can go back and kind of check some of those challenging sounds. Now, can you read the words? I want you to think about vocabulary. Can you read the words that would be a person's name? Can you read me 2 words that are a person's name? And then they could read something like Jim or Jack. Now I want to ask you a question. I want you to think about the use and the syntax, the grammar. Read the word right there on this third row that can not only act as a noun, a person, place, or thing, but also can be a verb showing action, and also can be an adjective describing. Think about it. The word is jet. Good job. Jet can be like an airplane. We're going to jet out of here when we're done today. Leave quickly, right? And I have jet black hair, describing my hair, or an inkjet printer. So that word, jet, can be used in different ways as a noun, a verb, or an adjective. We're adding spice to that boring decoding practice. We're bringing in language skills, phonology, vocabulary, syntax. Now let's get to the highest level, pragmatics. Prepare students. Remember, we're reading words that have that new sound, j. They all have closed syllables. Ready? Read. Then the students will read. If I heard some choppiness, read it with fluency. Now that you've read these words, I want you to think. I'm going to give you a phrase. If I were to say, I was only kidding, what word could be used instead of only? Ready? Read the word. The word is just. Let's use it in a sentence. I was just kidding. Great job. So I just demonstrated to you how I can take this new knowledge of learning letters and sounds, learning the syllables, getting to read words, but also to think about the language, the sounds, which we call phonology, right? The word meanings, vocabulary or semantics, the syntax, the parts of speech that I was trying to get to, that they had multiple uses and multiple parts of speech, and the pragmatics, all about the use, the sayings, the idioms, that kind of thing. And when I do this as a routine, guess what the children are thinking? They're already thinking at a deeper level. She's going to ask me a question about the sounds. She will ask me a question about the meaning. She's going to ask me about the use. She'll ask me about the part of speech. I'm going to have to say it in a sentence. I'm going to have to come up with some kind of saying. They're already thinking on a deeper level, and it's just not reading words with no meaning and with no use. It's incorporating language skills as we're working on literacy skills. Now I'd like to speak to you about reading fluency for English learners. Our students need opportunities to practice reading connected text, and of course it's going to be controlled. We want to make it what we call decodable, able to read, right? So I'd like to make sure that you know that English learners for fluency will need great work on that phrasing, knowing about how we phrase in the English language. They'll need help in working on, building what we call prosody, that expression, that inflection, adding what we call the supersegmental features of the language, the spice, adding the icing to the cake. And so as we look here, I give you an example of a passage, artisans. They've been talking about kind of the jobs that people do. And here we have the controlled text. But what I might also do is not only have them read the text, but I might do some pencil swings to help them follow along and know about that phrasing. So let's look at the first sentence together, everyone, and let's look at how we will phrase. It'll be my turn first. Jim makes rings for his job. Your turn. Remember those pencil swings. You can make those pencil swings. Ready? Jim makes rings for his job. The next sentence. The rings are for men and women. Ready, read? Phrase it. The rings are for men and women. Jim rubs the rings with a cloth. Your turn to read it how I phrased it. Jim rubs the rings with a cloth. Very good. So that's just a few examples about how we might work on that phrasing with the students. Really, these are foundational skills. Building fluency is a foundational skill. And we know that the more fluent a reader is, the more likely they're going to be able to get to comprehension. But please know, just because that English learner reads with fluency does not mean that they're automatically going to understand everything. And so not only would I work on building that fluency, then I can ask questions related to comprehension. Like, who is Jim? What would you say his job is? Oh, you said he makes rings for a living. What do you know about the person who makes rings for a living? That's called a jeweler. Remember, we practiced that sound at the end. It means the one who. The one who makes jewels is a jeweler. So yeah, even though this is controlled text, we can expand and give opportunities to learn about other words, right? Sometimes we're like, oh, boring controlled text, but we can add to that and expand upon that and relate to them. This is important. So building that fluency is necessary for building that comprehension. But for an English learner, I want to work on that oral language proficiency, and I want to make sure that they have the vocabulary that we can extend beyond that passage that we just read and practice with that fluency. Now I'd like to speak to you about vocabulary and some of the best word learning strategies for vocabulary building amongst English learners. One of the best strategies includes cognates and what we call cognate awareness. What's a cognate? A cognate is a word, right, that looks very similar across languages, similar in spelling, and it's also similar in meaning. And there are many cognates that exist across languages, and they can be related to English words, right? And so this cognate awareness can really help our students. And I give an example of canoe and how, in the Spanish language, it's canoa, right? And in other languages, you can actually picture the word in German, even in Vietnamese, that word for canoe. But we have to be careful about what we call false cognates. False cognates are words that look similar in spelling, but they're not quite the same meaning. So one of the famous ones between Spanish and English would be embarrassed, embarazado. One means you're embarrassed, the other one means you're pregnant, right? So you got to look up. Don't forget. Don't just assume because they look similar in spelling that they're similar in meaning. And one of the ways that you can help the students is by thinking about cognates and introducing them around a central idea. For example, when I speak, for example, about occupations, and I think about, wow, look at all the words that are similar, especially in the Spanish and English language. Some, report that it's 25% or 30% of words can be cognates. But here's what I want to tell you. I can study about occupations. Here's my central topic. And I might have a word like a carpenter. In Spanish, that would be carpintero. In English, I can say architect, and that would be arquitecto, right? Or doctor, right? So when we think about cognates, it's very wonderful to introduce them. But I want to go a step further with the cognates. So let's think about that word, carpenter. Let's make sure you processed it correctly. Carpenter. Put your hand under your chin. Let's see how many syllables it has in English. Carpenter. You open your mouth how many times? Carpenter. 3 times. It has 3 syllables. Let's try it in Spanish. Carpintero. How many times did you open your mouth? This time it was 4. There was actually 4 vowel sounds. Every time you're producing a vowel sound and every time you're opening your mouth, that's a syllable because every syllable has 1 sounded vowel. So that's how it's different. Carpenter, carpintero, right? I can also have them think about the sounds in the word carpenter. Let's see, students, can you get the sounds? We're getting at the phonology, the sounds. Carp, How many sounds? 7. Now, let's see in the Spanish language. Be careful with this one. That's like 9. So we had more sounds, right? And more syllables in the Spanish language. And really, it is true. If you look at English words and words that are fancy words and have lots of syllables are probably Latin-based words. And that's a hint to you that I can make a connection and maybe a possible cognate there. Now, I not only want to get to the sounds and the syllables, the phonology, I want to get to the meanings. What is a carpenter and what does a carpenter do? I needed some cabinets for my kitchen. And the carpenter came and he brought the wood and he made the beautiful cabinets in my kitchen, right? That is what a carpenter can do. Now, can you use the word carpenter in a sentence? I described what happened in my kitchen. Can you think of how you would express that? The carpenter created beautiful cabinets for the kitchen. Very nice. Now, a carpenter is a person, right? So that's a noun, and you used it as a noun in that sentence. So here I'm not only teaching the cognates, I brought in the sounds, I brought in the words, I brought in the word meanings. We're thinking about if there's any meaning units in there. We're also thinking about using it in a sentence and making sure we used it as a noun. And so that is bringing in language skills while I'm teaching this wonderful strategy for English learners. It's so useful. Some of the best word learning strategies, cognate awareness, having an awareness that these words across languages are similar in spelling and meaning. Another excellent word learning strategy is what we call morphological awareness. 60% of the English language comes from Latin. So what a benefit. What a benefit for our students that they can also see that many of the words from their home language can also be used in the English language, and they're connected. And there's many prefixes, roots, and suffixes that transfer across languages. And so we should take advantage of those. And I like to use like a root, like auto, right? In Espanol, auto. I said it in Spanish, right? So 60% of the English language, and what's really beautiful is like another about 15% comes from the Greek. And between those Latin and Greek roots, wow, we can have terrific vocabulary in the English language. But how would I teach it? I would teach it the same way I do Cognates. I would bring in those language components, right? So if I was talking about the ending, right, of ist, like artist, pianist, dentist. What did you hear at the end of each of those words? You heard ist. Let's figure out the meaning. Artist. Oh, do you have any of those words? Do you have the word artist in your home language? What is it? Artista. Oh, you said ista at the end, right? Do you have the word pianist in your home language? Pianista. There it is. Do you have the word dentist? Dentista. Oh, so it's sounding like ista is your ending for the one who. What does a pianist do? This is the person who plays the piano. What does a dentist do? That's the person who does what? Fixes your teeth when maybe you have a toothache, right? What does the artist do? Oh, the artist creates art. So we have these endings that are the same across languages, right? So we can go through the sounds, we can go through those word meanings, art and ist. Can you use the word artist in a sentence for me? Can you use the word pianist in a sentence for me? Can you use the word dentist? What part of speech is that? Those are all nouns. The person who. A person is a noun. And you just put it together in a beautiful sentence. You used it. So we went through really bringing in language skills as we were teaching that morphological awareness. And when our students understand, I can make those connections of the morphemes across languages, I say they have meta morphological awareness. We're going to do this so much that they start to use it as a strategy when they come across words that they don't know. They're going to look for those meaning units within words. They're going to look for those prefixes, roots, and suffixes to build words. And this is an excellent strategy for increasing the vocabulary levels of our English learners. Now I'd like to speak to you about reading comprehension. Some of the best strategies for reading comprehension really include that there's comprehension monitoring, and we want our students to be able to do that, but as teachers, we need to be monitoring comprehension. We know that having them collaborate with one another and engage with one another can also build that comprehension, being strategic and active with our reading. But we also want them to be answering questions and generating questions to make sure that they got to the gist of what they were reading. We know that they have to have the sufficient vocabulary to get to that comprehension. And we know that when they have opportunities to summarize, that summarization is so wonderful. So what I've done is I've tried to make it simple for you. And I want you to think of this acronym, 3PV, 3RQ. All right, that's that 3PV, 3RQ. And let me tell you what the 3 Ps stand for. I'm bringing in the best evidence that we know of today. The 3 Ps. The first P will begin with the purpose. We want our children and our students to focus on what's the purpose of what we're going to be reading. We can prepare a connection, building that background knowledge, seeing what do they know and what can I add to their prior knowledge. They can make a prediction and see if their prediction comes true regarding the passage that they'll read. We can build vocabulary. That's the V, making sure that they have enough vocabulary and maybe there's some challenge words in there. The R's will be for having them they'll read. We'll review with them what they've read, but here's something important, retelling. We're not only going to have them retell, we're going to ask questions, but more importantly, we're going to have them generate questions. That really extends beyond what they've read. So remember that passage on artisans? I might have started it like this. Students, today you're going to read a passage. If I said the title was Artisans, what would you predict that it's going to be about? That's right, maybe the persons who create art. Now, let's think about this. Art. What can be considered art? You're right. when you draw something, or when you see a sculpture, or when you make things. Anything can be, I'm not very good at art, but I wish I were, but anything that you make can be considered art. Like, maybe I created a beautiful dress. Oh my goodness, it's a piece of art, a beautiful painting. And as they're reading, remember, we build upon that fluency, and we want them to understand what they've read. So I might do a review. What was this passage about? Who were the main characters in the passage? What did they do? How did the text end? But I also wanted to make sure that they understood the vocabulary, words like content and zigzags. I don't know if they know it, depending on their oral language proficiency. You'll make those decisions. But giving the students the opportunity to not only have that model of a review, that model of a retell, then they can begin to summarize. And then we want to ask questions. And these questions should not only be basic questions, but higher order questions too, right? That how and what if. And then we have them generate their own questions. So it's question answering and question generation. So 3PV, 3RQ involves that purpose. What are we reading? That making that connection, preparing a connection, making a prediction, reviewing any vocabulary that they may need to know in order to understand the passage in front of them, having them read not only once, but maybe for building fluency and comprehension. We review with them. We model a retell, they retell, right? And then they answer questions, but more importantly, they generate questions. And when you use this 3PV, 3RQ, you are putting together those 8 comprehension strategies that are identified by the National Reading Panel Report. What's also important is to take the students beyond what they're able to read. Now I'd like to speak to you about read-alouds. We must have interesting text that we bring in that's above their reading level, so they have opportunities to expand their world knowledge, expand that vocabulary, relate to maybe something that they've been learning about, or maybe something that they're learning in other subjects. And so in one of our studies, we were doing science and mathematics, and so we brought in read-alouds related to those subject areas. And what that gives them an opportunity is to develop that vocabulary, that listening comprehension, build that world knowledge, and also experience high levels of words, high-level ideas as they're getting that language, as they're learning that literacy. I'd like to close just thinking about that English learners need opportunities. They need opportunities to read text, but they have to have had those foundational skills, the foundational skills of phonological awareness and phonics. They must build their fluency while we're always working on vocabulary and comprehension. You must be a language teacher. Bring in those cross-linguistic connections. You can do this. You are a teacher. It's up to you to do this work. And just because you don't know that home language, it's okay. You can know something about its structure and its connections because you're going to be teaching English, and you're going to be teaching English language and English literacy skills and everything that you do. Every teacher is a language teacher. Whether I teach language arts, whether I teach science, whether I teach math, you're a language teacher. You're a literacy teacher. And the only way to get to those high levels of content knowledge is to be a good reader. And as we think about our future, we will depend on these children. We will depend on our youth. They're our future leaders, and they're smart. They just need you to teach them in the way that they learn, and you must use their language, their home language, as an advantage. It's an asset. I'm bilingual and biliterate, and I get to do this talk today because of that asset.
Reading Universe is made possible by generous support from Jim and Donna Barksdale, the Hastings Quillen Fund, an advised fund of the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, the AFT, the Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation, and anonymous donors. Connor McDonald of Sagetopia was our multimedia producer. Our video editor was Mandana Tadayon. Our field crew was Edwin Noe Mendoza, Jacinia Vidales, and Arnold Martinez. Tammy Mount was project manager, and Noel Gunther was executive producer. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel at RU Teaching. Reading Universe is a service of WETA Washington, D.C., the Barksdale Reading Institute, and First Book.